You generally want people that can both amplify your strengths and mitigate your weaknesses. And I think for founders, you don't, nor should you feel the pressure to, gild the lily on anything or look through anything with rose colored glasses. Like one person can't be confident across all functional areas. So I think, to put your hand up and say, these are the 2 or 3 areas that I really need help with in the next 12 to 24 months, that's going to help attract the right partner or the right sort of advisors or thought partners to lean in.
Representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Van Horn. All right, folks, today's guest is Adam Ross, the guy who took facials out of the spa and into your self-care routine. He's a co-founder of Heyday, a skincare brand that scaled like wildfire, and now he's teamed up with us at Front Street Equity Partners to help scale goGLOW, which is one of our most exciting brands in our portfolio. Today, we're going to talk about things like how to build brand killers, why beauty is still the biggest white space in the US, and why goGLOW might just be the next Heyday. Let's get into it. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Erik.
It's been a long time in coming. So you're officially you're partners with us at Front Street, and we're going to help goGLOW grow even more. But I'd like to kind of go back to the beginning. Like, what pulled you originally from finance, the world of M&A, into beauty and skincare? Like, tell us the story.
Yeah. How did it happen? Um, yeah, so after undergrad, I went straight into, the world of mergers and acquisitions, and whether through luck or good judgment, I ended up being focused specifically in the consumer products and retail group. So from the early days, that was the focus, and over time and with experience, I think you end up specializing even further. And one of my verticals within that broader category was actually beauty. So found myself after a number of years working, and I'd only done about 18 months in Australia. For those listening, it's not a strong North Brooklyn accent. I transferred over to New York, and sort of found myself working with the L'Oreals, the Lauders, the P&Gs, the Gillettes of the world, Revlon in New York City. So got some real firsthand exposure to, in air quotes, the beauty industry. We can get back to that definition, a little later. So to my mind, that was actually one where, as a banker, you certainly get exposed to a broad number of categories, and beauty was actually just one for me where I'd never seen a category that was so large, growing yet so fragmented, and just so many macro tailwinds in its favor. So as I had exposure through the banking lens, there was a light bulb moment for me when I was diving into the world of spas and facials more specifically, that just seemed to suggest a massive opportunity. So I think as I reflected on that and listened to my intuition, that was part of the stepping stone to transition out of banking, which was fantastic for me, and roll up the sleeves and sit on the other side of the table and be more entrepreneurial, and build a very special relationship type brand.
How common is it for someone like you with your background doing that in banking to go that entrepreneurial route?
I don't think it's that common. I will say, Eric, from in my day, banking was very, very sort of like male dominated. So I literally in banking, the pendulum couldn't have swung further from a business that was 90+% male to jumping into beauty in the world of skincare that was 90% female. So I'd say the path I took was certainly a path less common. I think you have your like your little doubts along the way, but I'll say for me as an entrepreneur, and having been on that journey now for some time, I think in all like the deep dark days where you can get quite down on yourself, I've never once said, "I wish I was back in banking." So different things for different people, but for me, um, I think like the highs of being an operator and actually building a brand, has been very, very special, and I wouldn't have done it any other way.
Where did you go to undergrad and grad?
So undergrad was University of Sydney. I did a commerce degree, and then I came to New York. And after a few years here, I went to Wharton down at the University of Pennsylvania to get my MBA.
So again, this is like personal stuff. Like what did you learn getting an MBA from a prestigious school like that that actually helped you be an entrepreneur? Because a lot of entrepreneurs can look at an MBA, especially somebody that has one from Wharton and be like, that's, it's not really applicable in the world of entrepreneurship. So from your perspective, what did you learn there that you were able to apply to the real world?
Yeah, no, great question. I think again, I went a somewhat atypical route when I was at Wharton, where there's almost sort of two options when you got there. You could select a major, or you could be far more generalist, and actually sort of like leave the program without a major. I chose the latter, Eric, and obviously Wharton is very, very strong in finance more specifically. I'd had a number of years as an investment banker. I'd also gotten my CFA designation along the way, so I felt very strong from a finance perspective. But Wharton had some fantastic, broader topics around entrepreneurialism, around leadership. I think the mindsets that go with that, around negotiations. When I'm talking to friends over the years, I'd actually sort of say like negotiation, and even though it was done through a lens of business, was possibly the most like practical life life subject I'd been exposed to. So I actually deliberately threw myself into topics that I'd had no direct exposure to. So I did more on marketing and operations and things. And to my mind, that made me feel, a lot more well-rounded. And I think the privilege of being at a school like that is you get exposed to incredible guest speakers that are entrepreneurs in their own right, and hearing their stories and the ability to have Q&A with them firsthand, work on field trips and assignments with them as part of your program, was just fantastic exposure for me. And I think gave me as well, like the confidence to, I think, sort of jump into this more with 2 feet versus, sort of sticking it out and banking any longer.
So where's Heyday today? You're on the board. How many franchisees locations? Give us a sense of how big it is today.
Yeah, so we are number of doors in development, around sort of 50 locations today. In terms of my journey, you're right. I stepped away from being the CEO back in late 2023, and I think with every sort of entrepreneurial journey, the founder has a moment where, and for us, we're never a founder-led brand. I wasn't the face of Heyday, and we deliberately built the business to be larger and bigger than any one person. I think the skill sets that take you from zero to sort of 40 locations are very, very different from the skill sets that take you from 40 to 200. And in this situation, I wanted a CEO that had seen the playbook a couple of times before me, so could look around corners. And with scale comes the professionalization of and streamlining of SOPs, and becomes a lot more executional. And I think that, to my mind, is a real art in and of itself. So still play a role on the board from a strategic perspective. We see a massive opportunity in front of us. Certainly with a demographic that is early 20s to mid 40s. So um, on a nice upwards and to the right trajectory. With COVID, it was obviously a very, very challenging period for the brand. I don't think we could have been in a worse category with an esthetician that's literally 2 feet over someone's face, performing a very intimate service for 50 minutes. But the way in which we came out of that, like the engagement, like the metrics we're actually seeing in the business on a client basis, are actually north and 2x that of pre-COVID levels. So really use that opportunity to, I'd say, course correct, a few years of institutional learnings and mistakes. So when we did reopen our business in 2021, we had 9 doors at the time. So really excited about the growth trajectory. A lot more to come, and we're at that point now where we really want to put our foot on the gas and really entrench ourselves as a national brand.
Attention, franchisors and franchisees, there are two really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is if you're a franchisee and you want to be around a community of successful Zs and other brands and in other industries, this is why I created the Franchisee Mastermind. If you want access to the best single and multi-unit owners to know what they're doing, or if you want to be around other multi-brand owners, then you'll want to check out my Franchisee Mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections, to each other. They want a shortcut success, both short-term and long-term. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com. Let's talk about what attracted you to goGLOW originally. And I know that Mel, founder of goGLOW, is super excited to have you on board with Front Street, another person to help with help that brand, like you were saying earlier, look around corners and see the things that they don't see. There's reasons why we brought you into the partnership to help a brand grow faster and better and stronger with you than just with us, given your background. Because let me ask you first, what are some of your greatest strengths as you look back, some of the things that you've learned, some of the things that you realize that as you were CEO of Heyday are some of your greatest strengths?
I mean, I think there's a lot there that you can focus on. I think my ability to take a lot of information and synthesize it and prioritize it is probably one of the attributes I'm most proud of. I think with small brands, but those that are growing rapidly, you can get spoiled for choice, and it can be very tempting to try to be all things to all people. And I'm a I'm a I'm a huge proponent that you generally win with with as any quarter, any half year, any year, wherever the goals are. You're very clear in what they are. You're very clear in how they're prioritized. But success is usually a report card of three A's versus six or seven B's and C's. So I think it's also not just what you do; it's what you say no to. And I think that can be really important around getting people focused and keeping people aligned to the North Star. And I think how you're respectful of your team's time, and I think how you keep them aligned and incentivized to the North Star vision, fewer things done better, is where I um, find myself, I think, really playing a role in filtering out a lot of that noise.
When did you realize it was time to step down as CEO, and what went into that decision?
Yeah, great question. I'd actually socialized with the board. It's sort of a funny story. Um, just before COVID, in actually 2020, that I felt I was going to be the CEO and I was the right person to stay in that chair for another like 12 to 18 months. And based on that, it was probably prudent to start getting going on getting some feelers out there, just knowing there is a process to um, meet people, to look around and, negotiate and get someone on board. So, um, COVID obviously put a total spanner in that one. And again, my board couldn't have been more supportive and transparent. And as we were talking, to my mind, when the business was essentially closed, and just to give the listeners some context here, depending on state, and we're operating in 3 states at the time, our business was closed between 8 and 16 months. So when it came to, and Los Angeles was the last market to open for us, which was like June of 2021. So we were essentially, restarting the business, and we had some real challenges with estheticians, just given there was still a lot of like government subsidies and support for them. So we weren't a brand by any stretch that just yo-yoed back to pre-COVID levels. It was very much a 5 to 7% a month growing and compounding. So it took us some time to even get back to pre-COVID levels. But again, I think discussions with the board at the time, I said to them is, given we're essentially like rebuilding, we're opening with a smaller team. Let me be the person to do that for the next couple of years. Here are the goals, here are the KPIs that we're working towards, as we do that, and sort of fill the holes in the boat, so to speak, and get the business back on track with a much stronger foundation. That felt like a better inflection point for us to then know we could hire a CEO that could then take the business forward. So um, I'm generally one as a founder that you are on the side of being transparent with your board. You communicate the good and the bad, but zero ego on my end. I think in terms of, I think we have such a special brand in Heyday. It's bigger than any one person, as I mentioned earlier. So if anything, like really excited to hand over the reins to somebody who I think can play the right role for the next chapter, and know that I'm there on the board to support him every step of the way.
Let's shift gears a little bit, talk about like why Front Street, why goGLOW. I mean, you've seen so many different beauty brands over your career. Some probably amazing ones. What stood out about goGLOW to you?
I think a couple of things. I mean, the first one is, I think the passion that comes with Mel. Like the founder and CEO. She has such incredible background, and when you actually hear her talk about what she's setting out to achieve, she's so knowledgeable, she's so passionate, um, so diligent, and I think has something very, very special. And I think with founders, there's obviously a few things you look for. She cares so much. I met her over a year ago now, um, and had the chance to sort of tour a few locations with her, and you can see the level of attention, like the care that she has. She's certainly out to create a very, very special brand. And I think one thing that for me, where I can certainly apply some analogs to the Heyday experience is in beauty. There can be a lot of products that are still quite functional, or sort of like quite transactional. And I think what we're doing here with goGLOW is, um, we're creating a brand that has an experience. And I think brands that generally win, and brands that have like outsized advocacy, are those that you create an emotional connection to the client. Because yes, you are providing a service, but if you can wow them, and you want to be the highlight of like their day or their week and their month, and you're certainly playing a role in helping people to feel like they want to be better versions of themselves and leave more empowered and more confident, I think that's a really special mission and goal to wake up to every morning. So I see that in the goGLOW experience. I felt it when I experienced myself. I saw it in other clients, and I just see it so clearly in Mel. So I think to play a role here and be part of that, and to keep moving that forward, I think that's what's really exciting.
I want to speak to franchise buyers out there right now. Like the same question I just asked Adam are questions that you should be asking yourself. Or if you hear a founder talking, or somebody talking about a founder like Adam is about Mel over at goGLOW, like you want that in a founder as somebody that you're going to believe in, someone that you're going to follow, someone that is going to lead that company. So the same characteristics, the same thing that Adam was just describing, like that's what you want in a founder. So like us at Front Street, we talk to brands all the time, and we look for something special in founders. They don't know everything, and that's why they get, people like us involved. And we at Front Street don't know everything. We looked at your experience in beauty and scaling brands, and just you have something that we don't have. And this is what I think is interesting, Adam. Like, we decided to bring you in to our partnership to help a brand grow. And it's not about, it's about making the pie bigger versus like trying to get the biggest, chunk of equity or return or something for yourself. So you grow something bigger, and it's about the brand. And so you want founders to be thinking about the brand. You want, in a partnership, you need to be thinking about the business, not like your specific outcome of a partnership. So I think this is something that makes partnerships work, when you have a mindset of like, let's grow something bigger together versus like, how can I make my little piece bigger? What do you think about that? Like, you mean you have a similar mindset as that, or else we wouldn't be partners in this at Front Street.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's very well said, and I think in addition to obviously some of the attributes I was just discussing around Mel and her background, Eric, I think that the same thing applies to Front Street, applies to to Tory, the president. We have a brand and a business here with talent that is so outsized relative to the size of the business today, but have complementary experience that is going to help us like scale this the right way. And I think again for any sort of prospective, franchisee, you're only as good as the folks around you at the table. And in my experience, having been involved with multiple businesses over a long time, you also have a lot of people that are air quotes value add advisors, and they can provide the capital, but there's actually not much value beyond that. And I think when you and again, I think credit to Mel, she wants the right people around the table right now, and that's there's years of institutional learnings and brand buildings that come from other businesses in a way where we can be bigger, smarter, stronger. And that doesn't mean we're not going to have missteps and make mistakes, but it's who you want around the table when things do go wrong. So you can game plan, and all about validated learnings, and the quicker we learn, the stronger the growth, and the compound interest starts earlier. So I think collectively we've got a team that has got the nice sort of complementary and additive experience here, and that's a lot of it's always around talent.
Like, I think goGLOW's position is such a unique position right now, and other brands like it. Like, when you hear me talk about goGLOW, everyone should be thinking like, is my brand kind of at this stage where it's positioned to just have strong exponential growth, but it grew smart up into a point. You are adding the right leadership at the right time. You're adding the right franchisees at the right time. You're not growing too fast. You're not growing too slow. There's smart people surrounding the leadership team that are able to help them. And so, like, when you think of a brand that is, a smaller brand like goGLOW right now, because it's not huge. I'd say it's a smaller brand, but I think before long it's going to be a national leader in the space. And we talk to private equity all the time that are interested in talking to Mel over at goGLOW. And we're like, no, stay away from
Yeah.
her. She's building, she's
Yeah.
building. And Mel knows that. And I think that's a lesson for founders in and of itself. Like, even as a young brand, you will have private equity that are going to try to come and start talking to you, and they will be a distraction. You heard Adam earlier say, he's good at saying no to different things. And Mel, we've like, put the blinders on her so she could just focus on the things that she needs to do to grow the brand, to help the franchisees, which continues to grow the brand, and eventually it'll be a national leader. So what's the playbook, Adam, like to take a brand like where it is today to become that national leader? What do you think the playbook is? What do you think helps them do that?
I think there's two key ingredients, from the get go. I think one is brand, and two is product. And I think we've seen, I'd say over the last 5 to 10 years more broadly, with a lot of like D2C brands that have, I think, scaled very very quickly. Um, I don't think all of them have necessarily been A plus branding and A plus product. I think they've actually done it with better marketing than product. But I think you know, it's never been easier to launch a business today. Obviously, like the costs of, with a website or sourcing products, getting samples and coming to market, it's far cheaper than what it was, 5 to 10 years ago. So I think you've got to then come with to be successful, you've got to come with a product that is, unique. It's meaningfully different than anything else that's out there, and you've got to complement that with a brand that I think is also sort of quite differentiated and has different pillars and legs versus anything else that's out there in the category. And I think when you layer that in, and what we're doing here with I think is an incredibly talented team. What it does is I think it gives us a very strong foundation, with which to build. And I think in the early, in goGLOW's in a very interesting position right now. To your point, it's early days. We've got some great traction. We're getting some incredible interest, which is flattering from other private equity firms, obviously incredibly strong interest, rightly so, from potential franchisees. And we're being very thoughtful about how we're approaching that. We're not just saying yes to anything. We're importantly spending time to get the foundation right. So I think when we do scale, we're in a place to do it. And what I'm seeing already is we're having discussions and dealing with things almost ahead of the growth we're going to be growing into versus playing catch up. So I think that's also another sort of core component of it. I mean, you and I talking a little bit about fitness before the podcast here. Similar analogy, you don't to get the conditioning you want, you don't necessarily go out and like run as long as you can or as fast as you can. That's actually counterproductive. So part of it can be where less can be more, where you actually get the right conditioning, right? Build up the right sort of cardiovascular capacity. So when it really comes to when you need to push, when you need to grow, you're in a position to you got the capacity to do it and to do it the right way. So I think that also comes to building a business. I always used to like hate the saying "go slow to go fast." I don't have a better substitution for it, but I think I think the adage holds. And again, I think that always comes down to the right people at the table, and we've got permission to do that with our brands, with our team, and with our product. So I think for again others that are looking to any other businesses, it's you certainly want an aggressive plan, and you want a business that is going to have an emotional connection with customers and some very strong growth prospects. But you want the brand to be very, very thoughtful about how it moves through the various chapters of its own journey.
I think there's some misconceptions out there in franchising, especially with emerging brands. Um, I mean, I've been in franchising for 20 years. And so I've been as a franchisee, franchisor, advisor. I've just been on all sides of it. And a common thing that I see is franchisees, no matter at what stage that brand is, they expect it, want it to be further along than it is. When I was at a brand that had, 500 locations, they wanted it to be like its competitor that had 2,000 locations. Like
Yeah.
the brand is where it is. What I think you want is a brand, a franchisor with founders and team that's continually growing, continually adding value, continuing to look at the franchise as like, how do we help our franchisees more tomorrow than we did today? And as I'm sure you've seen that with Heyday, like what was it like early on in the first, few franchises to where it is today in terms of SOP, KPIs, helping the franchisees manage their business and stuff. Like give us a sense of early stage to where that one is today.
Yeah, it's I'd say we've been through the full cycle with that one. I think as a to your point, when you're an early franchisor, Eric, you're almost desperate to please and bend over and say yes to some of the demands or what franchise partners want versus I think staying true to again just focusing on the few key levers that are really going to have a compound impact on like the customer experience. And I say customer experience because like the financials are absolutely important and people are out to make a very healthy rate of return. But the numbers are actually like the output, like they're the byproduct of the inputs that you focus on. So, you know, to my mind, I think we've even with some of our franchise partners that wanted to expand faster, we tempered the growth because to our mind, just because a unit box is doing, pick a number, $1 million of revenue, that can come from, sort of, 10,000 customers giving $100, or it can come from like 1,000 customers giving $1,000. And there's a real quality to how you also want to grow. So, we actually slowed growth so we could be so maniacally focused on the unit economic model. And as a result, we've driven up our LTV and our retention and returning clients by such a substantial amount. So what it actually does is the density then gives you to expand in a city and grow. And again, I think it can be tempting to just sort of like grow and open more doors as quickly as possible. But like, hey, like let's understand the formula. And yes, every city has its nuances. So, you need flexibility around an 80/20 model. But I think for us, all roads came back to simplifying, focus, prioritizing again, what I was sort of touching on earlier, and just coming back to like what are the 3 to 5 things that like matter that drive the client experience, that keep them coming back. And then as you see that in the numbers, some of the initial skeptics turn into your most loyal, your loyal advocates, and they spread the good word. But that can be a bit of a process.
You're 100% right. I've experienced that multiple times with multiple brands as a franchisee. So as a franchisee, I wanted the franchisor to do more of this or to allow certain things within marketing. As Sola Salon Studios, we built 12 of those in Orange County. Jenny came in as the new CMO. I'm super good friends with Jenny today. We were just talking the other day, but she came in as the new CMO and she put a lockdown on things. You can't do this, you can't do that. We're going to focus on this. No, that thing that you want to do, Erik, might work, but like let's focus on the things that are working, the levers that you can pull that are driving in revenue, increasing retention, all of these other things versus trying a bunch of new stuff. I was the guy that wanted to try a bunch of new stuff. Some of those new things that we wanted to try, we eventually got to try and they worked. A lot of them were a waste of time and a waste of energy. So I had to take a step back and be like, and have open conversations with Jenny. I'm like, Jenny, I really think we should try this. But she's like, Erik, if I, took 5 ideas from every franchisee and chased that idea and let every franchisee do that thing, she's like, we would get nothing done here at corporate. So I started to see, as I've been on all sides of franchising,
Weird.
corporate staff, as a franchisee, as a franchisor, like the franchisor is more aligned than what franchisees think. Like franchisors are mostly really pro franchisee. They're thinking about the franchisees bottom dollar. They're thinking about how to make life easier for them, even if the franchisees don't realize that. On the flip side, franchisees can help brands a lot. And I've seen that. And I've seen how franchisees can work with the corporate office or the founder or the CEO or whoever it is that they have a relationship over there to make the brand better in general. What have you seen from you have any stories or anything where you've had those relationships with the franchisees where things that they've done, said, asked for really helped the franchisor?
Yeah, no, it's such a great point. I think just to add to what you're talking about, Eric. Again, in my experience, I found when a lot of people actually come with suggestions and thoughts, everyone's well intentioned, which is fantastic. And I think if I was going to like look back and critique myself, what we didn't do a good job of is, sort of taking those ideas, but being clear to the franchisee, like looking through it with an ROI lens and like giving them context because again, like people have got, some great ideas, but at the end of the day, you want to focus on like the fewer things that have like the biggest impact, whether that's in a quadrant, like effort to impact, whatever it is. So you want to create some lens and filters and structures with which you do things. What I loved about having a handful of corporate-owned locations is we could be the innovation lab, so to speak. So, and it's actually something we work through with our board. Every quarter it was basically like, here are the 6 or 8 tests that we had in various shops over the last quarter, right? Here was the test, here was the hypothesis on the result, and here was the result. And on those that worked, like here's almost like the economic impact across the system. So it was so clear to see, and there were so many things that didn't work, and that's I actually like love that because that they're validated learning. So like let's cut that based on what we're seeing. What are we now going to do for the next quarter? Um, what we've actually since done over time is we've partnered with some of our franchisees who have also been these innovation partners, and I think we've learned to be, again, I think thoughtful about like how and when we test things. But there've been a few tests that franchisees have come to me with that I didn't think would work, and at the end of the day, in a service based model, it was like one shop for 4 weeks. We're not making big strategic bets here, so like let's use this as an opportunity to learn. Um, how we did it on some bundling on services, how we did it with like a new service, how we played with some tweaks to our labor model. And these are things that, as we've now like rolled them out across the system, that have worked, that have come from our franchise partners. I mean, it's this beautiful symbiotic relationship. There's things that we're testing, we're sharing, and they understand the bar with which something needs to have a positive impact to be rolled out across the system. So again, as people see that, they're then more thoughtful about what they come to us with, and again, everyone's aligned on there's only going to be a few things that we roll out at any one time. So we're not overwhelming partners, we're not overwhelming the system. We're clear about things that could be good that may be rolled out later in the year. So it's not just what we do, it's the clarity with which we communicate it, and I think how we sequence it so everyone is also really, really clear on what the product roadmap looks like, but knowing we're not going to roll anything out that we haven't thoroughly tested and isn't going to yield a positive impact on the client experience or on the financial output.
That reminds me of a conversation I had a couple of weeks ago with a business partner of mine. I'm an investor in a small partnership that owns a handful of franchise locations as a franchisee. So I'm just the investor with that advisor. My partner, one of the partners in that, came to me and said, "Hey, Erik, I emailed the corporate office because I have an idea and I'm like, oh, great. That probably is going to be a no. Just get ready. It's going to be a no." And they told me the idea. And he's like, "I've already emailed the CEO there, the brand president." And they're like, "That's a great idea." And they ran it up the chain there and said, "We want to have another call with you to flesh out this idea." Now, Adam, if I had sent that email, it would have probably been a hard no because I would not have communicated it nearly as well as he communicated it. So communication and how you do it and the heart behind the why and what you're going to do as a franchisee, the thought that you put into the email and the plan, that all matters. Like I said, if I would have done that, it would probably been a hard no because they're like, forget that. What's this guy thinking? What's this guy doing? My business partner did it in a very thoughtful, helpful approach. And now it looks like the corporate office thinks it's a great idea and they're going to
Yeah.
put funds behind it to test it out, just like you said.
Yeah.
So, hey, I got another question for you. Um, we've been talking about like kind of emerging founders because that's really who we work with at Front Street. But think about a newer brand, even an older brand that needs some help, needs some new thought leadership in there, needs something. They might need capital, they might need a strategic partner. What should these founders be thinking about when it comes to bringing in an advisor like Front Street, or hiring an advisor, or putting together a really good robust board of directors? Like, what advice would you give to those founders?
I think I think initially, Eric, there's an honest assessment of, or a SWOT analysis, whatever you want to call it, but like where is the brand today? I think it's sort of like, where are our strengths? But importantly, like, what are the threats? What are the weaknesses? And I think you want to think about whether it's a board of advisors or capital partners. You need capital, but and again, my advice would be, yes, you need the capital, but you certainly, more importantly, want like the strategic acuity and the thought process around aligning on the strategic direction. But you generally want people that can both amplify your strengths and mitigate your weaknesses. And I think for founders, you don't, nor should you feel the pressure to gild the lily on anything, or look through anything with rose colored glasses. Like, one person can't be competent across all functional areas. So I think it's, to put your hand up and say, these are the two or three areas that I really need help with in the next 12 to 24 months. That's going to help attract the right partner, or the right sort of, advisors or thought partners to lean in. And, one thing that I've actually done from a board advisor perspective, is actually only construct 24-month contracts, because again, I think what you need for one chapter of your story, you won't necessarily need as the others. And I've had, um, you know, different experiences. Those that can still provide value, I'll renew their contract for another 24 months. Others, it's like, you were fantastic. You took us from A to B, and we've now got a much higher foundation. As a result of this new inflection point, we've now got a new series of challenges and issues. So I need someone who's better suited to do that. So, and again, I think the right capital and strategic partner should be aligned with you around doing that. But that's generally how I how I like to think about it.
So what's more fun? Being the co-founder, like being in the trenches, or being an advisor?
I think it's, I mean, when you're a, you can certainly be a lot more objective, I think, when you're an advisor. Um, but both are really meaningful to me, Eric, having obviously sort of founded a couple of other businesses, but you can pay it forward as an advisor. And I think having been a founder and been in that sort of CEO operator's position, I think your ability to like empathize with the founder, work through things with them. And I think these days, a lot of it is also just challenges with like the org chart, like how to allocate capital, how to get people aligned. Um, there's just so much like experience that you can pay it forward with. So I think it's really nice to do that. And I think when you're also then articulating, giving feedback, you can also be advice that you then take on yourself when you're, back in the founder's role. So it's a nice relationship. But I think what's certainly exciting about this partnership, here with you and Front Street and Mel is it's north of a decade of skincare experience, and there's uniqueness with it, with a one-to-one business model here that is really service and hospitality and experience based. And I think there are going to be some things that there'll be analogies to Heyday. There'll be other things that will be very, very different. But I think the experience is also how do you, someone once said to me, like, success equals different problems. So how quickly do we move through one problem, solve it, move on to the next one? So I think that's what I'm certainly excited about bringing that experience to bear.
I see some people that have had success in life that they don't want to work anymore and they're done and they're living the retired life at a younger age. I see other people that they go straight into founding another company, working 60, 80 hours a week to get their next 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, and they do it again and again and again. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I see us, when I say us, like you, me, Jeff, Bobby, and Jim, and kind of in the middle, where we've had some success, where we don't have to roll up our sleeves in businesses anymore. We don't have to chop wood, like you and Jeff like to say, but we choose to do it. And we're not doing it in the founder role, but we're still doing it. And it brings me energy to have these conversations with these founders, to be in the trenches with them. They're ultimately going to make their decisions and do a lot of the work, but like we're in there and we're doing a lot with these founders. We're rolling up our sleeves. We're getting our hands dirty. We're in it. We're in the trenches with the founders. And sometimes it might be a couple hours a week. Sometimes, I would imagine this week, I think there's probably over 10 hours, 10 to 15 to 20 hours combined with the different, the four of us that have been in the trenches on calls with goGLOW this week. Next week, it might be 5, following might be 40. It's whatever it needs. And we're there. But why roll up your sleeves? Why chop wood now?
Well, I'd say obviously different things for different people, Eric. If I think about my core purpose and values, I'm all about helping, I'm all about creating experiences for other people, or helping others be better versions or their best versions of themselves. So, to your point, when you're doing something that excites you, where it's aligned with your purpose, it doesn't feel like work. And I think, to my mind, um, the work you want to do at our age, it needs to be meaningful. But again, I think to sort of play a role in brands and experiences that can help with the confidence and empowerment of others, um, that feels good to me. So, it almost sort of checks the meaning, fulfillment, accomplishment triad here. So I don't necessarily view it as a trade-off. And again, I think when we can bring our collective experience to bear to support someone like Mel, who, as I've touched on earlier, is just such a special founder and so passionate with something that is really special here, then I think it's sort of hard to have a higher calling than that.
Last question. Um, What advice would you give franchisees? Because I've been talking to more franchisees recently. I just had one of the franchisees from my mastermind on the podcast. I'm going to have a handful of them on the podcast. And I'm still a franchisee on the franchisor side, on the franchisee side. What advice would you give franchisees working within an emerging brand? Like, how do they get the most out of that as a franchisee, or maybe any franchisee in general? So, advice to franchisees.
Yeah, I think there's a slight nuance, obviously, if it's sort of an earlier system versus something that's a bit more, a bit more established. But, um, I think it's, beyond doing your diligence, and I think feeling sort of good about the business. It's, I think, similar to what we're talking about with our work. This needs to be one where you need to be, I think, excited and energized by like the inputs of the brand that you're going to be involved with. Because if you actually, again, if you focus on that, like the financials are going to take care of themselves. And again, I think there's certain sort of foundational checks on what you need for an appropriate like economic rate of return. But if this is one where you're solely focused on the money, I think it's then hard to be sort of like a valuable, franchisee. Because again, I think you want this relationship where you're learning from the franchisor is learning from you, and you're sort of collectively as a unit becoming smarter and better. And I think that's one of the beautiful things I think around a, sort of a franchise system. When you get the right people in that care about how to like elevate and make it better, you generally end up in a place at the end that is so far ahead of what anyone thought you'd get to, a few years earlier. So I think it's, where you're on that journey together, and knowing that that's going to be the dynamic, that to my mind is what's going to create success. If you want to make a buck, and that's all you care about, I think that's going to ultimately backfire and create a pretty challenging situation.
All right, that's a wrap. Adam Ross, former Heyday co-founder, now building goGLOW with Mel, the Front Street team, into the next big thing. Adam, thanks for coming on the pod, man.
No, thanks for having me.
My partner, my business partner.
Good stuff to come.
Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.